The city hummed under a starless sky, its pulse a relentless rhythm of honking cars, distant sirens, and the low murmur of lives unfolding in the neon-lit sprawl. Zayn stood on the rooftop of an abandoned warehouse, the wind tugging at his leather jacket, carrying the scent of rain and something else, something wild, untamed, like the edge of a storm. His eyes, sharp and golden in the dim light, scanned the horizon. The city was alive, but it felt hollow to him, a place that hid the truth of his world beneath its concrete and glass. He was no ordinary man. He was Alpha, leader of a pack of werewolves teetering on the brink of collapse. And tonight, his heart was at war. Zayn's wolf stirred within him, restless, pacing in the confines of his mind. It sensed something, a pull, a thread of fate tugging at him, urging him to move, to seek. He clenched his fists, the muscles in his jaw tightening. He knew what it was, or rather, who it was. Delilah. A human. A woman who had no business in his world of claws and shadows. He'd met her only twice, brief encounters at a corner coffee shop where she worked, her smile bright enough to cut through the fog of his thoughts. But those moments had been enough. Enough to haunt him, enough to make his wolf howl with a need he couldn't explain. He growled low, the sound swallowed by the wind. This wasn't supposed to happen. Zayn had been raised on the old laws, the traditions that bound his pack. His fated mate, if such a thing existed, was meant to be a wolf, a strong one, with a bloodline that could strengthen their dwindling numbers. Not a human. Not someone like Delilah, whose life was all sunlight and simplicity, untouched by the darkness that coursed through his veins. She was a barista, for God's sakes, her days filled with steaming cups and small talk, her world so far removed from the blood and battles that defined his existence. Yet, every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Dark curls framing her face, eyes that held a quiet strength, and a laugh that made something in his chest ache. It was madness. He was Alpha, responsible for a pack that was fracturing under the weight of rival threats and internal doubts. The rogues, outcast wolves who bowed to no Alpha, were circling closer, testing the borders of their territory. His pack was weakening, their numbers dwindling, their unity fraying. He couldn't afford distractions, least of all a human who didn't even know what he was. Zayn paced the rooftop, his boots scuffing against the cracked concrete. The city lights flickered below, a sea of glowing pinpricks that mocked his turmoil. He tried to push her out of his mind, to bury the pull beneath his duties, but it was like fighting the tide. Every instinct in him, every fiber of his being screamed that Delilah was more than she seemed. His wolf didn't care about logic or tradition. It wanted her, needed her. And that scared him more than any rogue pack ever could. He stopped at the edge of the roof, gripping the rusted railing. The metal groaned under his strength, a reminder of the power he held and the control he fought to maintain. "She's not part of this," he muttered to himself, his voice rough. But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. What if she was? What if this pull wasn't just a fleeting obsession, but something deeper, something fated? The thought made his stomach twist. Fate was a cruel thing in his world, a force that didn't care about convenience or survival. His phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him out of his thoughts. He pulled it out, the screen glowing with a message from Marcus, his second in command. Border breach, Eastern Sector. Scouts spotted rogues. Need you now. Zayn's jaw tightened. Duty called, as it always did. He shoved the phone back into his pocket and turned from the city, his mind shifting to the pack. They needed him focused, not chasing ghosts of feelings he couldn't afford to have. The warehouse was a short run from the rooftop, tucked away in an industrial corner of the city where humans rarely ventured. It was their sanctuary, a place where the pack could gather without prying eyes. Zayn moved through the streets, his senses sharp, picking up every sound, the scuttle of rats in an alley, the hum of a flickering streetlight, the distant laughter of humans oblivious to the war brewing in the shadows. His wolf was alert, eager to break free, but he kept it caged. Control was everything. Without it, he was no better than the rogues. When he reached the warehouse, the air was thick with tension. The pack was already there, a dozen wolves scattered across the dimly lit space, their eyes glinting in the low light. Marcus stood near a makeshift table, a map of their territory spread out before him. Derek, the pack's elder, leaned against a wall, his weathered face unreadable, but his eyes heavy with concern. The others, younger wolves, some barely out of their first shift, shifted uneasily, their murmurs falling silent as Zayn entered. "Talk to me," Zayn said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. He stopped at the table, his gaze flicking to the map. Red marks dotted the eastern edge where their territory bordered the rogue lands. Marcus pointed to the marks. Scouts picked up their scent an hour ago. 3 rogues, maybe more. They didn't engage, just watched, testing us. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a warning. "They're getting bolder, Zayn. They know we're stretched thin." Zayn nodded, his mind racing. The rogues had been a thorn in their side for months, but this was different. They were probing, looking for weakness, and they weren't wrong to sense it. The pack was faltering, their numbers down after years of fighting and losses they couldn't replace. As Alpha, it was his job to hold them together, to make the impossible choices. But tonight his thoughts kept drifting back to Delilah, to the way her presence lingered like a scent he couldn't shake off. Derek stepped forward, his voice gravelly. "We can't keep reacting, Zayn. We need to strike first. Show them we're not weak." His eyes locked onto Zayn's, searching, as if he could see the turmoil beneath the surface. "But we need you here. All of you." Zayn's jaw clenched. Derek wasn't just talking about strategy. He was talking about focus, about loyalty, about the whispers that had started among the pack, that their alpha was distracted, that his mind wasn't fully with them. Zayn wanted to snap back, to tell them he was here, that he'd always been here. But the truth was heavier than he wanted to admit. Delilah was in his head, in his blood, and no amount of duty could drown her out. "I'm here," he said, his voice low but firm. "We'll deal with the rogues. Tonight." He turned to the map, forcing his mind to focus. "Marcus, gather the scouts. We move at midnight. Hit them before they can organize." Marcus nodded, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. The pack dispersed, preparing for the fight, but Derek lingered. "Zayn," he said, quietly, his voice carrying the weight of years. "You're carrying something. We all see it. Whatever it is, you need to deal with it before it deals with us."
Zayn didn't respond. He couldn't. Derek's words hit too close, stirring the storm inside him. He turned away, his gaze drifting to the window, where the city's lights glowed in the distance. Somewhere out there, Delilah was living her life, unaware of the chaos that surrounded him, unaware of the pull that was tearing him apart. As the pack prepared, Zayn's thoughts wandered back to their last encounter. She'd been wiping down the counter at the coffee shop, her movements quick and practiced, a faint smile playing on her lips as she chatted with a customer. He'd gone in for a coffee he didn't need, just to see her, to hear her voice. She looked up, her eyes meeting his, and for a moment the world had gone quiet. No pack, no rogues, no duty, just her. He shook his head, forcing the memory away. He couldn't afford this. Not now. The pack needed him. The rogues were coming. And yet, as he stepped into the night, the pull toward Delilah grew stronger, a thread of fate he couldn't cut. Was she a distraction? A weakness? Or was she something more? Something that could change everything? The question lingered, unanswered, as the moon rose higher, casting its cold light over a city that held secrets Zayn wasn't sure he could keep. The city pulsed beneath a sky bruised with clouds, its neon veins casting jagged reflections across rain-slicked streets. Zayn moved through the urban sprawl like a ghost, his boots silent against the pavement, his senses razor-sharp. The air carried the tang of exhaust and wet asphalt, but beneath it, his wolf caught something else, something primal, sharp, like the scent of an enemy lurking just out of sight. His golden eyes scanned the alleyways, the flickering streetlights, the shadowed corners where the city hid its secrets. As alpha of a fracturing werewolf pack, Zayn knew the night was never safe, not for him, not for his kind. And yet his mind wasn't fully here. It kept drifting, traitorously, to her, Delilah. The wind howled through the narrow streets, tugging at his dark hair, whispering warnings his wolf couldn't ignore. His instincts were alive, every muscle coiled, ready to shift at the slightest provocation. The rogues, outcast wolves who answered to no alpha, had been spotted near the eastern border again. Their scent lingered in the air, faint but unmistakable, a challenge to his pack's weakening hold on their territory. He should have been focused on that, on the threat closing in, on the pack depending on him to lead them through this storm. But instead, his thoughts kept circling back to a human woman who had no place in his world. Delilah. Her name was a quiet ache in his chest. He'd seen her again that morning, stepping out of the coffee shop where she worked, her dark curls catching the sunlight as she laughed with a coworker. She was so human, so untouched by the darkness that defined his existence. Her world was one of predictable routines, pouring coffee, wiping counters, smiling at strangers, while his was a battlefield of blood and loyalty. He lingered across the street, hidden in the crowd, watching her like some kind of stalker. The memory of her eyes, warm and unguarded, burned in his mind. She didn't know what he was. She didn't know the danger that trailed him like a shadow. And yet every time their paths crossed, it felt like the universe was pulling them together, defying every rule he'd been taught.
Zayn stopped at the mouth of an alley, his breath visible in the cool night air. The city's heartbeat thrummed around him, cars honking, music spilling from a nearby bar, the distant wail of a siren. To humans, it was just noise. To him, it was a map, every sound a marker of potential threats. His wolf paced restlessly within, urging him to run, to hunt, to find her. He shoved the impulse down, his jaw tightening. "Not now," he muttered under his breath, as if speaking to the beast inside him. He had a job to do. The pack was counting on him, and they were running out of time. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a sharp interruption. He pulled it out, the screen glowing with a message from Marcus. "Rogues moving closer. Scouts saw them near the old factory. Meet us at the safe house, now." Zayn's stomach twisted. The rogues weren't just testing borders anymore. They were closing in, probing for weakness. His pack was already stretched thin, their numbers dwindling after years of fighting. As alpha, it was his duty to hold them together, to make the hard choices. But those choices felt heavier tonight, weighed down by thoughts of Delilah and the inexplicable pull he felt toward her. He broke into a jog, cutting through the city's underbelly, sticking to the shadows where humans rarely looked. The safe house was a mile away, an old warehouse tucked between crumbling factories and forgotten lots. It was where the pack gathered, where they planned, where they reminded themselves who they were in a world that didn't know they existed. Zayn's senses sharpened as he moved, picking up every detail, the rustle of leaves skittering across the pavement, the faint scent of rogue wolves lingering in the air, the heartbeat of the city itself. It was a rhythm that both grounded him and set him on edge. As he ran, his thoughts betrayed him again, slipping back to Delilah. He'd gone to the coffee shop that morning under the pretense of needing caffeine, but really, it was to see her. She'd been behind the counter, her apron stained with coffee grounds, her smile bright as she handed a customer their order. When she looked up and caught his eye, something had passed between them, a spark, a question, a moment that felt too big for the mundane setting. "Hey, stranger," she'd said, her voice teasing but warm. He'd barely managed a reply, his wolf stirring at the sound of her voice, urging him to stay, to talk, to pull her closer. Instead, he grabbed his coffee and left, the weight of his responsibilities dragging him away. Now, as he navigated the city's labyrinth, that moment replayed in his mind, taunting him. Why her? Why now? His pack was on the brink, their enemies circling, their unity fraying. He couldn't afford distractions, especially not a human who didn't even know what he was. But the pull was undeniable, like a current dragging him under. His wolf didn't care about logic or duty. It wanted her, needed her, in a way that scared him. Zayn had always trusted his instincts, but this time they felt like a betrayal. He reached the warehouse, its looming silhouette a familiar refuge. The air inside was thick with the scent of smoke and sweat, the low murmur of voices falling silent as he stepped through the door. The pack was there. Marcus, Derek, and a handful of younger wolves, their eyes glinting in the dim light. The tension was palpable, a living thing that pressed against Zayn's chest. He strode to the center of the room, where a battered table held a map of their territory, marked with red X's where the rogues had been spotted.
"What's the latest?" Zayn asked, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. Marcus stepped forward, his face grim. "They're getting closer. 2 rogues were seen near the factory, watching our patrols. They didn't engage, but they're not hiding anymore. They know we're weak." Zayn's eyes narrowed as he studied the map. The rogues were bold, too bold. They sensed the cracks in his pack. The losses, the doubts, the whispers that their alpha wasn't fully present. He could feel Derek's gaze on him, heavy with unspoken questions. The elder wolf had been with the pack longer than anyone, his loyalty unquestionable, but even he was starting to doubt. Zayn couldn't blame him. The pack needed an alpha who was all in, not one torn between duty and a human woman who didn't belong. "We hit them tonight," Zayn said, his voice cutting through the silence. "We can't let them think we're scared. Gather the scouts, Marcus. We move at midnight." Marcus nodded, but his eyes lingered on Zayn, searching for something. "You sure you're with us, Zayn? All the way?" The question stung, sharp and direct. Zayn's wolf growled low in his chest, but he forced it down. "I'm here," he said, his tone hard. "I've always been here." Derek stepped closer, his voice low but heavy. "We need you focused, Zayn. The pack's hanging by a thread. If we lose you to whatever's pulling at you, we lose everything." Zayn's fists clenched, his nails biting into his palms. He wanted to snap back, to tell them he was still their alpha, still the one who'd led them through countless battles. But Derek's words hit too close to home. Delilah was in his head, her presence a constant hum beneath his thoughts. He couldn't shake her, no matter how hard he tried, and that scared him more than the rogues ever could. "I'm focused," Zayn said, his voice low but firm. "We deal with the rogues tonight. No hesitation." The pack dispersed to prepare, but Derek lingered, his eyes still on Zayn. "You can't run from it forever, son. Whatever's got you distracted, you need to face it, for all our sakes." Zayn didn't respond. He turned to the window, the city's lights blurring in his vision. Somewhere out there, Delilah was living her life, oblivious to the war brewing in the shadows. Her world was so different,
bright, simple, safe. But every time he thought of her, he felt the pull again, stronger than ever. Was she a weakness, a liability, or was she something more, something he couldn't yet name? The city held its secrets, and so did he. But as the night deepened, Zayn knew one thing for certain. The shadows were closing in, and he couldn't outrun them forever. The warehouse stood like a forgotten relic on the city's edge, its rusted walls and broken windows blending into the industrial decay of the surrounding lots. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp concrete, cigarette smoke, and the faint musk of wolves. The pack gathered in the dim light of a single flickering bulb, their shadows dancing across the cracked floor. Zayn stood at the head of the room, his broad shoulders squared, his golden eyes scanning the faces of his pack. They were fewer than they'd been a year ago, their numbers worn thin by battles and losses. The weight of their survival rested on him, the alpha, and tonight that weight felt heavier than ever, not because of the rogue wolves circling their borders, but because of her, Delilah. The map on the battered table before him was a patchwork of their territory, marked with red ink where scouts had spotted rogue activity. The eastern sector was bleeding crimson, a sign of the growing threat. Zayn's fingers traced the lines, his mind sharp but divided. He could feel the pack's eyes on him, Marcus, his second in command, leaning forward with a scowl, Derek, the elder, watching with a quiet intensity, and the younger wolves, their restless energy filling the room with tension. They were waiting for him to speak, to lead, to pull them through the storm brewing on the horizon. But his thoughts kept slipping, unbidden, to Delilah's face, her warm eyes, her soft smile, the way she seemed to anchor him in a way he couldn't explain. Marcus broke the silence, his voice rough. Scouts confirmed it. Rogues hit the eastern border again last night. Didn't engage, but they left their mark. Claw scratches, scent trails. They're taunting us, Zayn. He jabbed a finger at the map, pointing to a cluster of red X's. They know we're spread thin. If we don't act soon, they'll push deeper. Zayn nodded, his jaw tight. The rogues were a constant threat, outcasts who thrived on chaos, unbound by pack law. They'd been testing the borders for weeks, each incursion bolder than the last. His pack was weakening, their unity fraying under the strain of constant vigilance. As alpha, it was his job to hold them together, to make the impossible choices that kept them alive. But tonight, his focus felt like sand slipping through his fingers. Every time he tried to lock onto the strategy, Delilah's image flickered in his mind, a human woman who had no place in this world of claws and blood. Derek broke the silence, his voice rough. Scouts confirmed it. Rogues hit the eastern border again last night. Didn't engage, but they left their mark. Claw scratches, scent trails. They're taunting us, Zayn. He jabbed a finger at the map, pointing to a cluster of red X's. They know we're spread thin. If we don't act soon, they'll push deeper. Zayn nodded, his jaw tight. The rogues were a constant threat, outcasts who thrived on chaos, unbound by pack law. They'd been testing the borders for weeks, each incursion bolder than the last. His pack was weakening, their unity fraying under the strain of constant vigilance. And as alpha, it was his job to hold them together, to make the impossible choices that kept them alive. But tonight, his focus felt like sand slipping through his fingers. Every time he tried to lock onto the strategy, Delilah's image flickered in his mind, a human woman who had no place in this world of claws and blood. Derek broke the silence, his voice rough. Scouts confirmed it. Rogues hit the eastern border again last night. Didn't engage, but they left their mark. Claw scratches, scent trails. They're taunting us, Zayn. He jabbed a finger at the map, pointing to a cluster of red X's. They know we're spread thin. If we don't act soon, they'll push deeper. Zayn nodded, his jaw tight. The rogues were a constant threat, outcasts who thrived on chaos, unbound by pack law. They'd been testing the borders for weeks, each incursion bolder than the last. His pack was weakening, their unity fraying under the strain of constant vigilance. And as Alpha, it was his job to hold them together, to make the impossible choices that kept them alive. But tonight, his focus felt like sand slipping through his fingers. Every time he tried to lock onto the strategy, Delilah's image flickered in his mind. A human woman who had no place in this world of claws and blood. Derek broke the silence, his voice rough. 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 Derek, the elder, stepped forward, his weathered face etched with lines of experience. His voice was low, gravelly, carrying the weight of decades. We can't keep playing defense, Zayn. The rogues are circling because they smell weakness. We need to hit them hard, show them we're still a force. But we need you leading us, not just standing there. The words cut deep, sharper than any claw. Zayn's wolf stirred within, a low growl rumbling in his chest, but he forced it down. Derek wasn't wrong. The pack had always looked to him for strength, for clarity. But lately, they'd noticed the cracks. Whispers had started, quiet at first, but growing louder. Their alpha was distracted, his mind elsewhere. And they weren't wrong. Delilah was a constant presence in his thoughts, her human world of sunlight and simplicity pulling at him like a tide. He'd seen her that afternoon, passing by the coffee shop where she worked, her laughter floating through the open door. He hadn't gone in, hadn't dared, but just seeing her had been enough to unsettle him. "I'm here," Zayn said, his voice steady, but laced with an edge. "We'll hit the rogues tonight. Marcus, get the scouts ready. We move at midnight, strike their camp before they can organize." Marcus nodded, but his eyes lingered on Zayn, searching for something. Doubt, hesitation. Zayn felt it like a physical weight, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. The younger wolves shifted uneasily, their gazes flicking between their alpha and the map. They were loyal, but loyalty could only stretch so far when survival was on the line. Derek didn't move, his presence commanding the room. "You say you're here, Zayn, but we see it. Something's pulling at you." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "We've all noticed. The pack needs an alpha who's all in, not one with his head somewhere else." The room went still, the weight of Derek's words settling over them like a storm cloud. Zayn's fists clenched, his nails biting into his palms. He wanted to snap back, to tell them he was still their alpha, still the one who'd led them through countless fights. But the truth was undeniable. Delilah was in his blood, her presence a constant hum beneath his thoughts. He tried to push her away, to bury the pull under his duties, but it was like fighting the moon's call. His wolf wanted her, needed her, in a way that defied logic or tradition. "I'm leading this pack," Zayn said, his voice low but firm. "You don't need to question that. We deal with the rogues tonight, and we'll show them we're not breaking." Merrick held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded, though his expression didn't soften. "We're counting on you, Zayn. Don't make us regret it." The pack dispersed to prepare, their movements quick and practiced. Merricus barked orders to the scouts, while the younger wolves checked weapons and gear, their low murmurs filling the warehouse. Zayn stayed by the table, his eyes fixed on the map, but his mind was elsewhere. He could still see Delilah's face, the way she'd looked at him the last time they'd spoken, a quick exchange outside the coffee shop, her teasing him about his mysterious brooding. She'd laughed, and for a moment he'd felt human, not the alpha carrying the weight of a dying pack. He turned to the window, the city's lights a distant glow against the night. Somewhere out there, Delilah was living her life, oblivious to the war brewing in the shadows. Her world was so different, bright, predictable, safe. She didn't know about the rogues, the pack, the blood that stained his hands. And yet, every time he thought of her, the pull grew stronger, a thread of fate he couldn't cut. Was she a weakness, a distraction that could cost him everything? Or was she something more, something he wasn't ready to name? Merrick approached, his boots heavy on the concrete. "Scouts are ready. We've got a narrow window to hit the rogues before they move again." He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Zayn, I've got your back, you know that. But Derek's not wrong. The pack's talking. They're worried you're not. Here." Zayn's jaw tightened, his wolf bristling at the challenge. "I'm here, Maricus. I've always been here." Maricus studied him, his expression unreadable. "I know you are, but whatever's got you distracted, you need to deal with it. The rogues won't wait, and neither will the pack." Zayn didn't respond, his gaze drifting back to the window. The city hummed beyond, its rhythm a constant reminder of the world Delilah belonged to, a world he could never be part of. He told himself he could keep her at a distance, protect her by staying away. But the pull was relentless, and every step he took toward his duties felt like a step away from her. As the pack prepared, the air grew heavier, charged with the promise of violence. Zayn's wolf paced restlessly, eager for the fight, but his heart was divided. The rogues were a threat he could face, a problem he could solve with claws and strategy. But Delilah, she was a question without an answer, a human who'd slipped under his skin and refused to let go. The pack needed him to be their alpha, unwavering and strong. But as the night deepened, Zayn couldn't shake the feeling that the real storm wasn't the rogues. It was the choice he wasn't ready to make.
The city was a beast of its own at midnight, its pulse slowing to a low thrum as the streets emptied and the neon lights cast long, jagged shadows. Zayn led his pack through the urban maze, their footsteps silent against the cracked pavement of the eastern sector. The air was thick with the scent of rust and rain, but beneath it, Zayn's wolf caught the sharp tang of rogue wolves, wild, unclaimed, and hungry for chaos. His golden eyes glinted in the darkness, every sense honed to a razor's edge. The pack moved like a single organism, their bodies low, their breaths controlled, their unity a fragile shield against the storm they were about to face. But Zayn's mind wasn't fully with them. Delilah's face, her warm smile, flickered at the edges of his thoughts, a dangerous distraction he couldn't afford. The rogues had been spotted near an abandoned factory, their scent trails marking a brazen challenge to Zayn's pack. As alpha, he knew this fight was inevitable. The rogues were testing them, probing for weakness, and his pack, already worn thin by months of conflict, couldn't afford to falter. Zayn's muscles tensed, his wolf pacing restlessly within, eager for the release of battle. He signaled to Marcus, his second-in-command, who flanked him on the right, his eyes scanning the shadows. Derek, the elder, moved on his left, his weathered frame deceptively calm. The younger wolves fanned out behind, their energy crackling like static in the air. They were ready, but Zayn could feel the weight of their doubt, the whispers of his distraction lingering like a poison. "Stay tight," Zayn said, his voice low but commanding. "They're close. We hit hard and fast. No hesitation." The pack nodded, their eyes glinting with the fire of their wolves. But Marcus's gaze lingered on Zayn, a silent question in his expression. Zayn ignored it, forcing his focus to the task at hand. The rogues wouldn't wait for him to get his head straight. The factory loomed ahead, its broken windows like empty eyes staring into the night. The scent of the rogues grew stronger, sharp and bitter, mingling with the rust and decay. Zayn's wolf surged forward, urging him to shift, to let the beast take over. He held it back, needing the clarity of his human mind to lead. He slipped through a shattered gate, the pack moving like shadows, their footsteps barely disturbing the gravel. The air was heavy, charged with the promise of violence. Zayn's senses sharpened, picking up every detail, the rustle of leaves, the faint drip of water from a broken pipe, the low growl of a rogue hidden in the darkness. Then it came, a sharp howl that sliced through the night, echoing off the factory's walls. The rogues had seen them. Zayn didn't wait for their move. Now, he roared, his body shifting in a blur of motion. Fur rippled over his skin, claws extended, teeth bared as his wolf took over. The pack followed, their forms twisting into sleek, powerful wolves, their eyes glowing with predatory fire. The night erupted into chaos as the rogues lunged from the shadows, their numbers greater than Zayn had expected, at least a dozen, their fur matted, their eyes wild with hunger.
The clash was brutal, a symphony of snarls and tearing flesh. Zayn tore into the nearest rogue, his claws raking across its flank, sending it stumbling back with a yelp. His pack fought with precision, their movements synchronized despite their dwindling numbers. Marcus took down a rogue with a swift bite to its throat, while Derek's massive form barreled through two others, scattering them like leaves. The younger wolves held their own, their inexperience tempered by raw determination. But the rogues were relentless, driven by a savage need to dominate, their numbers giving them an edge.
Zayn's wolf reveled in the fight, its instincts sharp and unyielding. He moved through the chaos with lethal grace, his claws and teeth a blur as he took down one rogue after another. Blood stained his fur, the coppery scent fueling his rage. This was his territory, his pack, and he'd be damned if he let these outcasts tear it apart. But in the midst of the battle, a stray thought broke through, a memory of Delilah, her laughter echoing in the quiet of the coffee shop, her eyes meeting his with a warmth that made his chest ache. For a split second, his focus wavered, his wolf faltering as her image filled his mind. It was enough. The rogue alpha, a massive beast with scars crisscrossing its muzzle, seized the moment. It lunged, its teeth sinking into Zayn's side, pain exploding through him like wildfire. He roared, twisting to throw the rogue off, but the damage was done. Blood seeped into his fur, hot and sticky, and his movement slowed, each step a struggle against the agony. The rogue alpha circled him, its eyes gleaming with malice, sensing weakness. Zayn's pack rallied around him, Marcus leaping to intercept another rogue that tried to flank him, but the tide of the battle was shifting. "Zayn!" Derek's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and urgent. "Stay with us." The elder's wolf form was bloodied but unbowed, his eyes burning with a fierce demand. Zayn shook off the pain, forcing his mind to clear. Delilah's face lingered, a ghost in his thoughts, but he shoved it down, locking it away. He couldn't afford to lose focus, not now, not when his pack was fighting for their lives. With a guttural growl, Zayn surged forward, his wolf fueled by desperation and duty. He collided with the rogue alpha, their bodies a tangle of fur and fury. The rogue was strong, its size and savagery a match for Zayn's skill, but Zayn had something more, a pack to protect, a legacy to uphold. He fought with everything he had, his claws slashing, his teeth snapping, each move a defiance of the pain tearing through his side. The rogue alpha lunged again, aiming for his throat, but Zayn was faster. He ducked under the attack, his claws finding the rogue's underbelly, tearing through fur and flesh. The rogue howled, staggering back, and Zayn pressed the advantage, his teeth closing around its throat in a final brutal strike. The rogue alpha collapsed, its body still, blood pooling beneath it. The remaining rogues faltered, their leader's defeat breaking their resolution. Zayn's pack seized the moment, driving the outcasts back into the shadows, their howls fading into the night. The factory fell silent, the air heavy with the scent of blood and victory. Zayn stood panting, his wolf form battered but unbroken, his side throbbing with each breath. The pack gathered around him, their eyes reflecting a mix of relief and exhaustion. They'd won, but it had been too close. Marcus shifted back to human form, his chest heaving, blood streaking his face. "You all right, Zayn?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. Zayn nodded, forcing his wolf to recede, his body shifting back with a groan of pain. The gash in his side was deep, but he'd heal. He always did. Derek approached,
his human form weathered but steady. "You hesitated," he said, his voice low, not accusing but heavy with truth. "In the middle of the fight, you froze. We can't afford that, Zayn. Not now." Zayn's jaw clenched, the sting of Derek's words sharper than the rogue's teeth. He wanted to argue, to say he'd been in control, but the truth was undeniable. Delilah had slipped into his mind at the worst possible moment, and it had nearly cost him everything. "It won't happen again," he said, his voice rough, more to himself than to Derek.
The elder studied him, his eyes searching. "It better not. The pack needs you, Zayn, all of you." He turned away, helping the younger wolves tend to their wounds, but his words lingered, a warning Zayn couldn't ignore. As the pack regrouped, Zayn's gaze drifted to the city beyond the factory, its lights a distant promise of another world. Delilah was out there, unaware of the blood and chaos that defined his night. Her life was so different, simple, bright, untouched by the violence that stained his hands. But the pull toward her was stronger than ever, a thread of fate that refused to break. He'd fought for his pack, bled for them, but the thought of her had nearly undone him. Was she a weakness he couldn't afford? Or was she something more, something worth risking everything for? The night held no answers, only the echo of a battle won and the shadow of a war still to come. The air in the abandoned factory was thick with the scent of blood and dust, the echoes of the recent battle lingering like a ghost. The rogues had fled, their howls fading into the night, leaving Zayn's pack battered but victorious. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the ragged breathing of the wolves and the occasional drip of water from a leaking pipe. Zayn stood in the center of the factory, his wolf form receding, fur giving way to sweat-slicked skin. His side throbbed where the rogue alpha's teeth had torn into him, blood seeping through his torn shirt, but the pain was secondary. His mind was a storm, torn between the victory they'd clawed from the night and the unshakable pull toward Delilah, a human who had no place in this world of violence and shadows. Zayn's pack gathered around, their forms shifting back to human, their faces etched with exhaustion and wary relief. Marcus, his second in command, wiped blood from a cut on his cheek, his eyes scanning the group for injuries. Derek, the elder, stood apart, his weathered frame silhouetted against a broken window, his gaze fixed on Zayn with a weight that felt like judgment. The younger wolves moved slowly, tending to their wounds, their murmurs low but charged with unease. They'd won, but the cost was evident in the bruises, the blood, the flicker of doubt in their eyes. He felt it too, the fragility of their unity, the cracks that had deepened with every fight. He leaned against a rusted beam, his breath shallow, the pain on his side a sharp reminder of his near-fatal hesitation. Delilah's face had flashed in his mind during the battle, her smile a fleeting distraction that had nearly cost him everything. He clenched his fists, nails biting into his palms, trying to ground himself in the present. The pack needed him here, now, not lost in thoughts of a woman who didn't even know what he was. But the pull toward her was relentless, a tide pulling him under, and it scared him more than the rogues ever could. Marcus approached, his boots crunching on the gravel-strewn floor. "We held the line, Zayn," he said, his voice steady but laced with concern. "But it was too close. You took a bad hit." He gestured to the gash in Zayn's side, the blood still oozing despite the wolf's natural healing. "I'll heal," Zayn said, his voice rough, brushing off the concern. He straightened, ignoring the stab of pain, and met Marcus's gaze. "We all took hits. We're still standing." "Barely," Marcus muttered, his eyes narrowing. "You froze out there, Zayn, just for a second, but we all saw it." "That's not you." He paused, his voice lowering. "What's going on? The pack starting to talk."
Zayn's jaw tightened, his wolf stirring at the challenge in Marcus's tone. He wanted to snap back to assert his authority as alpha, but Marcus was right. The pack had seen his hesitation, felt the shift in his focus. They were a family, bound by blood and loyalty, but that loyalty was fraying. The rogues weren't the only threat. Doubt was creeping in, and Zayn knew he was the source. Before he could respond, Derek stepped forward, his presence commanding despite his age. "They're not wrong to talk," he said, his voice gravelly, carrying the weight of decades. "You're our alpha, Zayn, but you're not here, not fully. We can't afford an alpha who's divided, not when the rogues are circling closer every night." The words hit like a blow, sharper than the rogue's teeth. Zayn's wolf growled low, but he forced it down, his eyes locking onto Derek's. "I'm here," he said, his voice low but firm. "I led us tonight. We won. What more do you want?" Derek didn't flinch. "I want you whole, Zayn. The pack feels it. Something's pulling at you, and it's not just the fight. You're carrying something, and it's making us weak." He paused, his eyes softening but not relenting. "We need you to choose, the pack or whatever's got you distracted." Zayn's chest tightened, the weight of Derek's words pressing down on him. They weren't just talking about strategy or survival. They were talking about Delilah. He'd tried to keep her at arm's length, to protect her from his world, but she was there, in every quiet moment, in every heartbeat. Her laugh, her warmth, the way she looked at him like he was just a man, not a monster. It was unraveling him. He'd seen her that morning, passing by the coffee shop where she worked, her dark curls catching the light as she chatted with a customer. He hadn't gone in, hadn't dared, but just seeing her had been enough to stir his wolf, to make him question everything he'd been taught about duty and fate. "I'm not divided," Zayn said, but the words felt hollow, even to him. He turned away, his gaze drifting to the broken window where the city's lights flickered like distant stars. Delilah was out there, living her simple human life, unaware of the blood and chaos that defined his. She didn't know about the pack, the rogues, the war that never ended. And yet every time he thought of her, the pull grew stronger, a thread of fate he couldn't cut. Marcus stepped closer, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. "Zayn, I've got your back, always have, but the pack's on edge. They're tired, they're scared, and they're starting to wonder if you're still the alpha we need. You need to figure this out, whatever it is, before it tears us apart." Zayn didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the city beyond. The victory tonight had been hard won, but it felt hollow. The rogues would be back, stronger, bolder, and his pack was fraying at the edges. He could feel the unrest, the whispers that had grown louder with every fight. They needed an alpha who was unshakable, not one torn between duty and a human woman who didn't belong. But pushing Delilah away felt impossible, like cutting out a piece of himself. His wolf wanted her, needed her, in a way that defied logic or tradition. Derek's voice broke the silence, softer now, but no less heavy. "You're carrying a burden, son. We all see it, but you can't carry it alone, and you can't let it weaken us. The rogues won't stop, and neither will the doubts if you don't face what's eating at you."
Zayn's fists clenched, his nails biting into his palms, drawing blood. He wanted to tell them they were wrong, that he was still their alpha, still the one who'd led them through countless battles. But the truth was undeniable. Delilah was in his blood, her presence a constant hum beneath his thoughts. He'd tried to bury it, to focus on the pack, but the pull was relentless. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her smile, her warmth, the way she made him feel human in a world that demanded he be a beast. "I'll handle it," Zayn said finally, his voice low, more to himself than to the pack. We'll regroup, reinforce the borders. The rogues won't get another chance. He straightened, ignoring the pain in his side, and met their gazes. We're not done fighting. Marcus nodded, but the doubt in his eyes lingered. Derek turned away, his silence louder than words. The younger wolves dispersed, tending to their wounds, their murmurs filling the factory with a restless energy. Zayn stayed where he was, his gaze drifting back to the window. The city hummed beyond, its rhythm a stark contrast to the chaos within him. Delilah was out there, oblivious to the blood on his hands, the weight of his duties. Her world was so different, bright, simple, safe. But the pull toward her was stronger than ever, a force he couldn't fight. As the pack prepared to move out, Zayn's thoughts lingered on her. The victory tonight had come at a cost, not just the blood and pain, but the growing divide within his pack. They needed him to be their alpha, unwavering and strong. But Delilah was a question he couldn't answer, a human who'd slipped under his skin and refused to let go. Was she a weakness that would destroy them? Or was she something more, something worth risking everything for? The night held no answers, only the weight of a victory that felt like a warning and the shadow of doubts that refused to fade. The city was cloaked in a restless quiet, the kind that settled over it in the small hours when even the neon lights seemed to dim. Zayn stood at the edge of an empty lot, the cracked asphalt beneath his boots littered with debris from a city that never stopped moving. The moon hung low, its silver glow casting long shadows that danced across the ground. His heart pounded, not from the rogue threat that still lingered at the edges of his territory, but from the woman standing before him, Delilah. Her dark curls caught the moonlight, her eyes wide with questions she hadn't yet voiced. She shouldn't be here, in this desolate corner of his world, but fate had a cruel way of ignoring what should be. Zayn's wolf paced within him, restless, urging him to act, to speak, to bridge the gap between them. He'd tried to keep her at a distance, to protect her from the truth of what he was. But tonight, that distance had crumbled. She'd followed him, her footsteps soft but determined, tracking him to this forgotten place after spotting him slip out of the coffee shop where she worked. He'd seen her there earlier, her smile bright as she handed him his coffee, her teasing, "You're back again, stranger," cutting through the noise of his thoughts. He'd meant to leave, to bury the pull he felt toward her. But now she was here, standing in the heart of his shadows, demanding answers.
"Zayn," Delilah said, her voice soft but steady. "Why do you keep running from me? Every time I think we're getting somewhere, you pull away. What's going on?" Her eyes searched his, a mix of confusion and determination that made his chest ache. She was so human, so unaware of the storm she was stepping into. He took a step back, the gravel crunching under his boots, his hands clenched at his sides. The air was cool, tinged with the scent of rain and rust, but his wolf caught something else, a faint trace of rogue scent, distant but present, a reminder that danger was never far. He should send her away, tell her to go back to her safe, predictable life. But the words stuck in his throat. The pull toward her was stronger than ever, a thread of fate that refused to snap. His wolf wanted her, needed her, and for the first time, Zayn couldn't fight it. "You don't belong here, Delilah," he said, his voice low, rough with the strain of holding back. "This world, it's not yours. You don't know what you're stepping into." Her brow furrowed, but she didn't back down. "Then tell me," she said, taking a step closer, her voice firm despite the tremor in it.
I'm not stupid, Zayn. I see the way you move, the way you watch everything like it's a threat. There's something you're not telling me, and I'm not leaving until you do." Zayn's heart clenched, his wolf growling low in his chest. She was too close, too stubborn, too much like the light he'd been chasing in the dark. He ran a hand through his hair, his golden eyes flickering to the moon above. The pack was waiting, their doubts about his leadership growing louder after the last fight. The rogues were circling, their attacks more brazen. He couldn't afford this distraction, but standing here with Delilah's gaze locked on his, he knew he couldn't keep running from the truth. "You want to know?" he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, raw and heavy. "You want the truth? It's dangerous, Delilah. It's not just about me. It's about a world you can't imagine." Her eyes softened, but her resolve didn't waver. "Try me," she said, her voice steady now. "I'm not afraid of you, Zayn. Whatever it is, I can handle it." He stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. She was human, fragile in ways she didn't understand, but there was a strength in her that shook him. He took a deep breath, the air sharp in his lungs, and made a choice he couldn't take back. "I'm not human," he said, the words tasting foreign, like a confession he'd never meant to make. "I'm a wolf, a werewolf. My pack, my world, it's built on blood and survival, and you're standing at the edge of it." Delilah's eyes widened, a flicker of disbelief crossing her face, but she didn't step back. "A werewolf?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're serious?" Before he could answer, a rustling sound broke the silence, sharp and sudden. Zayn's head snapped toward the shadows, his senses flaring. The rogue's scent was stronger now, too close. His wolf surged forward, urging him to shift, to protect. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice sharp, his body tensing as he scanned the darkness.
Delilah's breath hitched, but she nodded, stepping closer to him, her trust a weight he felt in his bones. The rustling grew louder, and then a figure emerged from the shadows, a rogue wolf, its eyes glowing with malice, its fur matted and scarred. Zayn didn't hesitate. His body moved on instinct, the shift ripping through him like wildfire. Fur sprouted across his skin, muscles rippling, claws extending as he transformed into his wolf form, a massive, powerful beast, its golden eyes burning in the moonlight. Delilah gasped, stumbling back, her hand flying to her mouth. Zayn's wolf stood before her, majestic and terrifying, its presence filling the lot with a primal energy. The rogue lunged, its teeth bared, but Zayn was faster. He met it head-on, their bodies colliding with a force that shook the ground. Claws slashed, teeth snapped, the air filled with snarls and the coppery scent of blood. Zayn's wolf was relentless, driven by the need to protect, not just his territory, but her. Delilah, who stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock as she watched him fight. The rogue was strong, its savagery fueled by desperation, but Zayn was alpha. His claws found the rogue's flank, tearing through fur and flesh. The rogue howled, staggering back, but Zayn didn't let up. With a final brutal strike, he sank his teeth into the rogue's throat, ending the fight in a flash of blood and silence. The rogue collapsed, its body still, and Zayn stood over it, panting, his fur stained with blood. He shifted back, his human form emerging through the pain of the transformation, his chest heaving as he turned to Delilah. She was still there, her face pale, her eyes locked on him. The reality of what she'd seen, what he was, hung between them like a storm ready to break. "Delilah," he said, his voice hoarse, raw with the weight of his confession. "This is my world. This is what I am." She didn't speak at first, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. Her gaze flicked to the rogue's body, then back to Zayn, her mind racing to process the impossible. You're a wolf," she whispered, her voice trembling but not with fear, something closer to awe. "This is real, all of it." Zayn took a step toward her, his hands raised, as if to calm her or to keep her from running. "I didn't want you to see this," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't want you to know. This world, it's dangerous, Delilah. It's not yours." She shook her head, her curls bouncing in the moonlight. "Don't tell me where I belong," she said, her voice steadier now, a fire kindling in her eyes. "I'm here, Zayn. I saw you. I saw everything, and I'm not running." Her words hit him like a jolt, shaking something loose inside him. He'd expected her to flee, to reject the truth, but she stood her ground, her gaze unwavering. His wolf howled within, not with anger, but with something deeper, a need, a bond he couldn't deny. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low, almost pleading. "My pack, the rogues, the war we're fighting, it's not just about me, it's about survival. And you being here, it makes it harder." "Then let me help," she said, stepping closer, closing the distance between them. "I don't know what this means, Zayn, but I know I feel something for you, and I'm not walking away from that."
Zayn's heart raced, his wolf urging him to pull her close, to claim the bond that was growing stronger with every moment. But the weight of his duties pressed down on him, the pack, the rogues, the fragile balance he was struggling to maintain. "You're human," he said, his voice strained. "You can't be part of this. It's too dangerous." "I don't care," she said fiercely, her eyes blazing. "I'm not afraid of you, Zayn. I'm not afraid of this." She gestured to the lot, to the rogue's body, to the world she'd just glimpsed. "If this is your world, then I want to understand it. I want to be in it." The air between them crackled, charged with the weight of her words. Zayn stared at her, torn between the pull of his heart and the demands of his pack. She'd seen him, truly seen him, and she hadn't run. For the first time, he let himself feel the hope he'd buried deep, the hope that maybe, just maybe, she could belong in his world. But before he could speak, a distant howl cut through the night, sharp and urgent. The rogues weren't done. His pack needed him. "Stay close," he said, his voice firm, his eyes locking onto hers. "This isn't over." Delilah nodded, her face set with determination, and in that moment, Zayn knew she was no longer just a human on the outside of his world. She was in it, deeper than he'd ever meant to let her go, and there was no turning back. The moon hung heavy in the sky, its pale light filtering through the broken windows of the abandoned lot where Zayn and Delilah stood. The air was thick with the scent of blood and earth, the rogue wolf's body lying still at the edge of the cracked asphalt, a stark reminder of the violence that defined Zayn's world. His chest heaved, the pain from his wounds pulsing with each breath, but it was nothing compared to the storm raging inside him. Delilah stood before him, her dark curls catching the moonlight, her eyes fierce with a determination that shook him to his core. She'd seen him, truly seen him, and she hadn't run. Her words echoed in his mind. "I'm not afraid of you, Zayn. I'm not walking away." Zayn's wolf growled low, a primal urge to pull her close, to claim the bond that thrummed between them like a living thing. But he held back, his human side wrestling with the weight of his responsibilities. The pack was his family, his duty, his everything. They were teetering on the edge of collapse, their numbers dwindling, their unity fraying under the constant threat of rogue wolves. As alpha, he couldn't afford to be divided, not when every decision could mean the difference between survival and extinction. Yet here was Delilah, a human who'd slipped past his defenses, her presence a light in the darkness he couldn't ignore. "Delilah," he said, his voice rough, raw with the struggle within. "You don't know what you're asking. This world, my world, it's not just dangerous, it's brutal. You saw what happened tonight. That's just the beginning." She stepped closer, undeterred, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his breath catch. "I saw you, Zayn. I saw what you are, Zayn, and I'm still here. I'm not running. I want to be part of this, part of you."
Her words hit him like a punch, stirring something deep within. Hope, fear, longing all tangled together. He wanted to believe her, to let himself fall into the bond that was growing stronger with every moment. But the pack's needs loomed over him, a shadow he couldn't escape. The rogues were still out there, their attacks growing bolder, and his pack was questioning his leadership. Marcus and Derek had seen his hesitation in the last fight, felt the cracks in his focus. They needed an alpha who was all in, not one torn between duty and a human who didn't belong. "You can't be part of this," Zayn said, his voice strained, almost pleading. "You're human, Delilah. My pack, they won't accept you. They need someone who can fight beside them, someone with a wolf's blood. Not," he trailed off, the words catching in his throat, "not a human, not someone who could be broken so easily in their world of claws and blood." Delilah's eyes flashed, a spark of defiance cutting through the moonlight. "Don't tell me what I can handle," she said, her voice fierce. "I may not have claws or fangs, but I'm not weak, Zayn. I'm here because I choose to be, because I care about you. And if your pack can't see that, then maybe they're the ones who need to change." Her words stunned him, her conviction shaking the walls he'd built around his heart. He'd spent years as alpha, making hard choices, sacrificing everything for the pack's survival. But Delilah wasn't just a choice. She was a force, a challenge to everything he'd been taught. His wolf howled within, urging him to accept her, to let her in, but the weight of his duties pressed down harder. The pack was on the brink, the rogues circling closer, and every moment he spent with her felt like a betrayal of the wolves who depended on him. He turned away, his gaze drifted to the city skyline, its lights a distant reminder of the world Delilah belonged to. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "My pack is everything. They're my family, my responsibility. I can't risk them for this." He gestured between them, the bond that pulsed like a heartbeat. "If I let you in, if I let this happen, it could destroy everything I fought for." Delilah stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. The contact sent a jolt through him, his wolf stirring at her warmth. "I'm not asking you to choose, Zayn," she said softly, her voice a lifeline in the chaos. "I'm asking you to stand with you. I know it's dangerous. I know I don't understand everything, but I'm not walking away, not from you." Her words broke something in him, a crack in the armor he'd worn for so long. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the strength in her eyes, the unwavering resolve that made her more than human. She was a storm in her own right, and for the first time, Zayn wondered if she could survive his world not as a liability, but as a partner. But the thought was cut short by a sharp howl in the distance, a chilling reminder that the rogues weren't done. His pack needed him, now more than ever. "We can't stay here," he said, his voice firm, his wolf senses flaring. "The rogues are still out there. I need to get you somewhere safe." Delilah shook her head, her grip tightening on his arm. "I'm not going anywhere without you," she said, her voice fierce. "If you're fighting, I'm with you. I don't care what your pack thinks. I'm not leaving your side." Zayn's heart raced, torn between the urge to protect her and the pull to let her stay. He could feel the pack's eyes on him, even from a distance, their doubts and questions weighing heavier with every passing moment. He was their alpha, their leader, but Delilah was something else, something he couldn't define but couldn't let go. "You don't know what you're signing up for," he said, his voice raw. "This isn't just about tonight. It's about a war that never ends. If you stay, you're in it for good." "Then I'm in," she said, her voice unwavering, her eyes locked on his. "I'm not afraid, Zayn. Not of you, not of your world. I'm here, and I'm staying." The air between them crackled, charged with the weight of her decision. Zayn's wolf howled within, a mix of triumph and fear. She was choosing him, choosing this life, but the cost was more than she could know. The pack wouldn't accept her easily, and the rogues would see her as a weakness to exploit. But standing there, with her hand on his arm, her eyes burning with resolve, Zayn felt something shift. Maybe she wasn't a distraction. Maybe she was something more, a strength he hadn't realized he needed. Before he could respond, another howl cut through the night, closer this time, sharp and urgent. Zayn's senses snapped to attention, his wolf surging forward. "We need to move," he said, his voice hard, his eyes scanning the shadows. "The rogues are coming back. Stay close, Delilah, no matter what happens." She nodded, her face pale but resolute, and followed as he led her toward the warehouse where the pack was waiting. The city's hum faded behind them, replaced by the rhythm of their footsteps and the distant growl of danger. Zayn's mind raced, torn between the bond with Delilah and the duty to his pack. She'd seen his world, chosen to stay, but the path ahead was fraught with peril. The pack needed an alpha who could lead without hesitation, but Delilah was a part of him now, whether he wanted to admit it or not. As they moved through the shadows, Zayn knew one thing for certain. His loyalties were divided, and the coming fight would test them in ways he wasn't ready to face. The night was a living thing, its pulse thrumming through the city's shadowed veins as Zayn led Delilah toward the warehouse. The moon hung low, its silver glow casting jagged shadows across the cracked pavement. The air was thick with the scent of damp asphalt and the faint acrid tang of rogue wolves, a warning that danger was never far. Zayn's senses were razor sharp, his wolf pacing restlessly within, every instinct screaming that the rogues were closer than they'd been in weeks. Delilah walked beside him, her steps quick and determined, her face pale but resolute. She'd seen his wolf, heard his truth, and chosen to stay, a decision that both anchored and terrified him. His pack needed him whole, but Delilah was pulling at the seams of his duty, and the tension was tearing him apart. The warehouse loomed ahead, a hulking silhouette against the city's glow. It was the pack's sanctuary, a place where they could shed their human masks and plan for the war that never ended. Zayn's heart pounded, not just from the threat of the rogues, but from the weight of Delilah's presence. She was human, fragile in ways his pack would never understand, yet her resolve burned brighter than any wolf's. He glanced at her, her dark curls catching the moonlight, her eyes scanning the shadows with a mix of fear and determination. "Stay close," he said, his voice low, edged with urgency. "No matter what happens, you stay behind me."
Delilah nodded, her jaw set. "I'm not running, Zayn," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I meant what I said. I'm with you." Her words stirred his wolf, a primal urge to protect her clashing with the reality of the danger they were walking into. The pack was already on edge, their trust in him fraying after his hesitation in the last fight. Marcus and Derek had seen it, felt the cracks in his leadership, and now Delilah was here, a human in a world of wolves. Zayn pushed the thought aside, focusing on the warehouse ahead. They were almost there when a sharp howl sliced through the night, chilling and close, too close. Zayn froze, his senses flaring. "Get down," he hissed, pulling Delilah behind a rusted dumpster. The air shifted, thick with the scent of rogue wolves, their presence a dark cloud closing in. Before he could signal the pack, shadows erupted from the alley. 3 rogues, their eyes glowing with malice, their fur matted and scarred. They moved with a coordinated savagery, their claws glinting in the moonlight as they lunged. Zayn shifted in an instant, his body twisting into his wolf form, fur rippling, claws extending. He met the first rogue head-on, their bodies colliding with a force that rattled the ground. Snarls filled the air, teeth snapping as Zayn tore into the rogue's flank, blood spraying across the pavement. Delilah gasped, her back pressed against the dumpster, her eyes wide with shock but not panic. She clutched a jagged piece of metal she'd found on the ground, her knuckles white, her gaze locked on the chaos. The second rogue circled, aiming for Zayn's side, but he was ready. He twisted, his claws slashing, sending the rogue stumbling back with a yelp. The third rogue, larger and more cunning, darted toward Delilah, its eyes glinting with predatory intent. Zayn roared, his wolf surging with a protective fury, but he was tangled with the first rogue, unable to break free. "Delilah!" he shouted, his voice a guttural mix of human and beast. She didn't hesitate. With a cry, Delilah swung the metal shard, catching the rogue across the muzzle. It snarled, stunned, and she swung again, her movements clumsy but fierce. The rogue staggered, giving Zayn just enough time to finish the first and lunge at the third, his teeth sinking into its shoulder. The rogue howled, retreating into the shadows, but the damage was done. Delilah had fought, and she'd held her ground. The fight was over in moments, the rogues fleeing into the night, but the air was thick with tension. Zayn shifted back, his human form battered, blood seeping from a fresh gash on his arm. He turned to Delilah, his chest heaving, his eyes searching her for injuries. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice rough, fear lacing his words. She nodded, her breath shaky, the metal shard still clutched in her hand. "I'm fine," she said, her voice trembling but strong. "I told you I'm not running." Before Zayn could respond, the warehouse door slammed open and Marcus burst out, his eyes wild. "Zayn!" he shouted, his gaze flicking to Delilah, then to the blood on the pavement. "What the hell happened? We heard the howls." Derek and the younger wolves followed, their faces grim, their bodies tense, as they scanned the lot. "Rogues," he said, his voice steady but despite the pain. "They ambushed us. We took them down, but they're getting bolder." He glanced at Delilah, who stood tall despite the fear in her eyes. She helped.
Marcus's eyes narrowed, his gaze locking onto Delilah. "She helped?" he said, his tone sharp with disbelief. "She's human, Zayn. She shouldn't be here, let alone fighting our battles." Delilah stepped forward, her chin lifted. "I'm here because I choose to be," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "I'm not helpless. I can help, and I will." The pack fell silent, their eyes flicking between Zayn and Delilah. Derek stepped forward, his weathered face unreadable, but his voice carried the weight of authority. "This isn't her fight," he said, his gaze on Zayn. "You know that. She's a liability, and now she's in the middle of a war she doesn't understand. Your focus is slipping, Zayn, and we're all paying for it." Zayn's jaw clenched, his wolf growling at the challenge. "She's not a liability," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "She held her own tonight. She's part of this now, whether you like it or not." The words hung heavy, a line drawn in the sand. The pack exchanged glances, their unease palpable. Marcus shook his head, his frustration clear. "You're our alpha, Zayn, but you're making this harder than it needs to be. The rogues are closing in, and we're barely holding together. We can't afford distractions." Delilah's eyes flashed, her voice sharp. "I'm not a distraction," she said, stepping closer to Zayn. "I'm here for him, and I'll do whatever it takes to help. If that means fighting, I'll fight. If that means learning your world, I'll learn. But I'm not leaving." Her words stunned the pack into silence, their eyes wide with a mix of shock and grudging respect. Zayn's heart pounded, torn between pride and fear. She was proving herself, but at what cost? The pack's doubts were growing louder, their trust in him fraying, with every moment he let Delilah deeper into their world. He was their alpha, but his leadership was cracking under the weight of his divided loyalties.
Derek's voice broke the silence, heavy and measured.
"You're walking a dangerous line, Zayn," he said. "She's brave, I'll give her that, but bravery won't keep her alive in our world, and it won't keep us strong. You need to decide where your loyalty lies, her or us." Zayn's fists clenched, his nails biting into his palms. He wanted to tell them they were wrong, that he could protect both Delilah and the pack, but the truth was undeniable. The rogues were relentless, the pack was fracturing, and Delilah's presence was a spark in a powder keg. Yet as he looked at her, standing tall despite the blood and chaos, he saw something he couldn't ignore, a strength that matched his own, a fire that refused to be extinguished. "We'll deal with the rogues," Zayn said, his voice firm, his eyes meeting Derek's. "And Delilah stays. She's proven she can handle herself. We don't turn our backs on strength, no matter where it comes from." The pack fell silent, the tension thick enough to choke on. Marcus shook his head, but said nothing, turning to help the younger wolves secure the area. Derek held Zayn's gaze for a long moment, then nodded, though his expression remained grim. Delilah stood by Zayn's side, her hand brushing his, a quiet gesture that anchored him in the storm.
As the pack moved back to the warehouse, Zayn's mind raced. Delilah had fought beside him, proven her resolve, but the fractures in his leadership were deeper than ever. The rogues would come again, and the pack's doubts would only grow. He was torn, his loyalty to his pack clashing with the bond he felt with Delilah. She was no longer just a human on the outside of his world. She was in it, fighting for him, and that changed everything. But as the moon cast its cold light over the city, Zayn knew the real battle was just beginning, and the cost of his divided loyalties might be more than he could bear. The warehouse was a fortress of shadows, its rusted walls and cracked concrete floors, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning within Zayn. The pack was restless, their murmurs filling the air as they cleaned weapons and bandaged wounds from the recent rogue attack. The scent of blood and sweat lingered, mingling with the faint musk of wolves. Zayn stood by the map table, his golden eyes fixed on the red marks dotting their territory, but his mind was elsewhere. Delilah sat nearby, her dark curls catching the dim light of a flickering bulb, her presence a quiet anchor in the storm. She'd fought beside him, proven her resolve, but the pack's doubts about her and his leadership were louder than ever. And now a new whisper had reached them, one that threatened to upend everything, a cure. The rumor had come from a wandering healer, a lone wolf who'd passed through the city with tales of an ancient spell. It could bridge the gap between human and wolf, transforming a human like Delilah into something more, something that could belong in their world. The cure promised to merge bloodlines, granting strength and resilience without a full shift into a wolf. But it came with a cost. If the spell failed, if it didn't align with her soul, Delilah could die. The thought twisted Zayn's gut, his wolf growling low at the risk. Yet the possibility of her truly belonging, of standing by his side without the pack's judgment, was a temptation he couldn't ignore. Marcus approached, his face grim, his voice low. "You heard about the healer's talk?" he asked, leaning against the table. "This cure, it's got the pack buzzing. Some think it could change everything. Others think it's a trap we can't afford." Zayn's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking to Delilah. She was listening, her expression unreadable, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. "It's a risk," he said, his voice rough. "If it works, she could be one of us. If it doesn't—" He trailed off, unable to say the words. The thought of losing her was a blade in his chest, sharper than any rogue's claws. Derek, the elder, joined them, his weathered face etched with caution. "The pack's divided, Zayn," he said, his voice heavy. "Some see this cure as a way to strengthen us, to make her fit. Others think it's a distraction we can't afford. The rogues are circling, and we're barely holding on. You need to decide what's more important, her or our legacy." The words stung, a reminder of the choice Zayn had been dodging. His pack was his family, their survival his duty as alpha, but Delilah was something else, a bond he hadn't chosen but couldn't deny. She'd fought beside him, faced the rogues with a courage that silenced even Marcus's doubts, but her humanity was a wedge between him and the pack. The cure offered a way out, a chance to bridge that gap, but the risk was unbearable.
Delilah stood, her eyes meeting Zayn's. "I heard what you said about the cure," she said, her voice steady but soft. "Is it true? Could it make me like you?" Zayn's heart clenched at the hope in her voice, the fear she tried to hide. "It might," he said, his voice low, "but it's dangerous, Delilah. If it goes wrong, you could—" He stopped, the words choking him. "I can't lose you." She stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm, the contact sending a jolt through him. "I'm not afraid," she said, her eyes fierce. "If this means I can stand with you, really stand with you, I want to try. I don't want to be the reason your pack doubts you." Her words shook him, her strength a mirror to his own. He wanted to pull her close, to promise her everything would be okay. But the truth was heavier. The pack was fracturing, the rogues growing bolder, and the cure was a gamble that could cost him everything. "You don't know what you're asking," he said, his voice raw. "This isn't just about us. The pack needs me to lead, to put them first. If I let you do this and it fails, it could break us all." Derek's voice cut through, sharp and measured. "She's right about one thing, Zayn. Her presence is tearing at you, and we all feel it. This cure could solve that, or it could destroy us. You need to choose, the pack or her." Zayn's fists clenched, his wolf howling within, torn between loyalty and love. He looked at Delilah, her eyes burning with determination, and felt the pull stronger than ever. "I won't let you risk your life," he said, his voice breaking. "Not for me, not for the pack." Delilah's gaze softened, but her resolve didn't waver. "It's my choice, Zayn. I'm in this now, whether you want me to be or not. Let me decide what I'm willing to risk." The warehouse fell silent, the pack watching, their tension a living thing. Marcus shook his head, his voice low. "We're out of time, Zayn. The rogues won't wait for you to figure this out. If you're going to lead us, you need to be all in." Zayn's mind raced, the weight of the cure's temptation pressing down on him. It could make Delilah part of his world, silence the pack's doubts, strengthen their bond. But the risk, the thought of her lifeless, her light snuffed out, was more than he could bear. He was alpha, but he was also a man, and for the first time, he didn't know which loyalty came first. As the pack waited for his decision, a distant howl pierced the night, sharp and urgent. The rogues were coming, and the storm was closer than ever. Zayn's eyes met Delilah's, the unspoken question hanging between them: love or legacy? The answer would change everything, and as the moonlight cast shadows across the warehouse, Zayn knew the choice couldn't wait much longer. The city was a restless beast under the moon's cold gaze, its neon lights flickering like a heartbeat on the verge of stopping. Zayn stood on the roof of the warehouse, the wind sharp against his skin, carrying the scent of rain and the acrid tang of rogue wolves. The air crackled with tension, the kind that preceded a storm or a slaughter. Below, his pack prepared for what they all knew was coming, the final rogue assault. The rogues had been relentless, their attacks growing bolder, their numbers swelling. Zayn's pack was battered, their unity fraying. and he stood at the heart of it, torn between his duty as alpha and the fated bond with Delilah, the human who'd upended his world.
Delilah stood beside him, her dark curls whipping in the wind, her eyes fixed on the city skyline. She'd fought alongside him, faced the rogues with a courage that silenced even the pack's doubts. But her presence was a spark in a powder keg. The whispers of the ancient cure still lingered, a dangerous temptation that could make her one of them or take her life. Zayn's wolf howled within, urging him to protect her, to claim her, but his human side knew the cost. The pack needed him whole, unwavering, and every moment he spent with her felt like a betrayal of the wolves who'd bled for him. Delilah said, her voice soft but steady, cutting through the wind, "Zayn, you're quiet, too quiet. What's going on in your head?" He turned to her, his golden eyes catching the moonlight. Her strength, her fire was undeniable, but she was human, fragile in ways that haunted him. He said, his voice rough, "The rogues are coming, tonight. We've tracked their movements, their scents. This isn't a skirmish, it's a war. And the pack," he paused, his jaw tightening, "they're looking to me to lead them through it, but I'm not sure I can." Her brow furrowed, her hand brushing his arm, the contact sending a jolt through him. "You're their alpha," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You fought for them, bled for them. They trust you, even if they don't always show it." Zayn shook his head, the weight of her words pressing down on him. "They trust the alpha I was, before you, before I let myself feel this." He gestured between them, the bond that pulsed like a heartbeat. "You're in my blood, Delilah, and it's tearing me apart. The pack needs me to put them first, but I can't stop thinking about you, about what happens if I lose you." Her eyes softened, but her resolution didn't waver. "Then don't lose me," she said, her voice fierce. "I'm here, Zayn. I've chosen this, chosen you. I know it's dangerous, but I'm not walking away, not from you, not from your world." Her words shook him, her strength a mirror to his own. But the choice loomed larger than ever. The pack was his legacy, his family, their survival, his duty. The rogues were closing in, their numbers overwhelming, and any misstep could mean annihilation. The cure was a gamble, a whisper of hope that could make Delilah part of his world or take her from him forever. He tried to push her away, to protect her from the violence that defined his life, but she'd stayed, fought, proven herself. And now, as the final battle loomed, Zayn stood on a precipice, forced to choose between love and legacy. A sharp howl cut through the night, chilling and close. Zayn's senses flared, his wolf surging forward. He said, his voice hard, his eyes scanning the shadows below. He grabbed Delilah's hand, pulling her toward the stairs. "Stay with me, but stay back. This is going to be bad." She nodded, her face pale but determined, and followed him into the warehouse. The pack was ready, their eyes glinting in the dim light, weapons and claws at the ready. Marcus stood by the map table, his face grim, while Derek's weathered gaze locked on to Zayn, heavy with expectation. The younger wolves shifted uneasily. Their tension was a living thing. They knew what was coming, and they knew their alpha was divided. "Zayn," Derek said, his voice low, cutting through the murmurs. "This is it. The rogues aren't testing us anymore. They're coming to end us. We need you, all of you, or we're done."
Zayn's jaw clenched, his wolf growling at the weight of Derek's words. He wanted to promise them everything, to be the alpha they needed, but Delilah's presence at his side was a reminder of the choice he couldn't escape. "I'm here," he said, his voice firm but strained. "We fight together. We hold the line." Marcus stepped forward, his eyes flicking to Delilah. "And her?" he asked,
his tone sharp. "She's fought before, but this is different. She's a human, Zayn. She's a risk we can't afford." Delilah's chin lifted, her voice cutting through the tension. "I'm not a risk," she said. "I've fought with you, and I'll fight again. I'm not here to weaken you. I'm here to help." The pack fell silent, her words hanging heavy. Marcus's eyes narrowed, but Derek's expression softened, a flicker of respect in his gaze. Zayn's heart pounded, pride and fear warring within. She was no longer just a human. She was part of this, part of him, but the pack's doubts were a blade at his throat. Another howl, closer now, shattered the moment. The rogues were coming, and there was no more time for words. Zayn turned to the pack, his voice rising. "We hold this ground," he said. "We fight for our home, our family. No matter what comes, we don't break." The pack nodded, their eyes burning with resolution, but Zayn felt the fracture in their unity. As they moved to their positions, Delilah stayed by his side, her hand brushing his, a silent promise. The cure's temptation lingered in his mind, a chance to make her one of them, to silence the doubts. But the risk was too great. He couldn't lose her, not now, not ever. As the first rogue shadows appeared at the warehouse's edge, Zayn's wolf surged, ready for the fight. But his heart was divided, torn between the pack he'd sworn to protect and the woman who'd become his world. The future was uncertain, a precipice he couldn't avoid. Love or legacy? The choice would define them all, and as the rogues charged, Zayn knew the answer would come at a cost he wasn't ready to pay.
Like, share, and subscribe to show the author support and love.